Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to day number 3 of Birmingham Tech Week. Today is all about scaling up. It's Scale Up Day. It's about growing your organization in the right way, successfully achieving things that you probably never even thought was possible, and also leveling up. I'm delighted to be joined today by Thomas Blood from Amazon AWS, and Thomas is going to be speaking about Amazon's culture of innovation and customer centricity. So, of course, the week is being run in association with 3 of our lead partners, Tech Nation, the West Midlands Growth Company, and the Department for International Trade. And just a big shout out to these organisations for supporting the week, but also for all they do across the UK to support innovation, technology and digital across the West Midlands, but also the work they do to promote us internationally as well, and helping organisations export, but also encouraging inward investment, which of course is such an important aspect of our economy. And thank you to our 2020 sponsors. This week would not be possible without you. Big shout out to NatWest, our lead and headline sponsor for this year. They do some fantastic work across the region with their Entrepreneur Accelerator, and of course Copper, Culture Group, BJSS, Sidetrade and BMET. Thank you so much for your support. And then so many partners really that have kind of engaged with us throughout this process, helping us support both from a public sector and private sector point of view. Today I'm going to do a shout out to Make UK. Make UK are a fantastic organisation helping some wonderful apprenticeships kind of understand kind of manufacturing and innovation like never before. Again, such an important aspect of a young person's career into tech. And so at this point, I'm going to kind of really let Thomas introduce himself. But before I do, it's kind of, we're just saying it's become a bit of an Amazon day today. So we're kicking off with Thomas. Afterwards, we're launching the Amazon Small Business Accelerator in association with Enterprise Nation and the Combined Authority. And then we've got some Amazon scale-up stories from their recent awards. So yeah, an Amazon day, and really pleased to have Thomas join us. So Thomas, welcome. Love to know a little bit more about kind of, your career and what you do at Amazon.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. And thanks for joining us this morning and coming in early, coming into work early on your long commute to your home office. I am super pleased to be here. I like to travel to Birmingham and the Midlands when I get a chance, and hopefully that'll happen again in the near future. I've been with AWS for 4 years. I started off as an enterprise strategist, and for the last year and some months, I've been leading the digital innovation teams for the Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Let me see if I can pull up my PowerPoint.
Yeah, you should be able to do that, Thomas, now.
All right.
And Thomas, you're in Munich at the moment, so we've got an international.
Yes, indeed. Here we go. Sorry, while I'm figuring this out. Too many tools, too many different versions of doing things. No, that's not what I want. Sorry, bear with me. All right, here we go. Can you see this okay?
Wonderful.
Excellent. So as I was saying, I've been with AWS for 4 years. I was a customer myself from 2014 to 2016. And I led a transformation of a US company, or a business unit in a US company called Experian. You probably all know Experian because it's not that far from your neighborhood. And in 2014 to 16, we had to make some big changes. And in part, it had to do with working from a legacy environment and working from, frankly, a legacy mindset, right? And so I want to go over these. This is not part of the core presentation, but I like to throw it in because I think it's important. So this is that what we tried to do, and what we did do is we went to what we call a high frequency organization, to go smaller batch sizes, increase the frequency of releases, continuous refactoring with DevOps. These are all things we didn't know how to do, right? This is all new. We didn't know how to do DevOps. We didn't know how to do Agile, and we definitely didn't know how to do cloud. So what we learned here in this process is that the harder part of a transformation is not the technology. The technology is actually fairly straightforward, especially when you have smart people on the team. They can pretty much solve any technical problem that comes up. It's the human piece. It's the culture. It's the how organizations function, how you organize yourself. That's the hard part. And so that's the kind of thing that we had to work through. And so that includes things like having data-driven decision-making instead of having the highest paid person in the office come in and make a proclamation that everyone then has to line up behind, but rather looking at the data and what does the data tell you. To finally also get to a point where we bridge the gap between, frankly, the business and IT. IT was often treated as sort of the outsourcing organization inside the company. And we actually wanted to be a full partner and someone who helps drive business. So we bridged those gaps. We brought the teams back together. And it was a really exciting journey. This idea of being able to pivot, instead of having a year-long plan and then sticking to that plan no matter what, is really hard for some companies and organizations to do. And also incessantly working towards reducing this lead time, to accelerate, to go fast. That's the thing that makes us successful. And then, of course, assuming that things are going to go wrong, because they will, and instead having systems, not that you can prevent all the things that happen. You have to have systems that are resilient and that can recover and that can recover gracefully, hopefully. Let me give you a quick example, kind of an anecdote. I also worked for the US Navy a long time ago, and I had a 100 gig network I had a university network that I was supporting. And the network went down for unexplained reasons. So I couldn't find anything in our network, in our systems. So I had a guy drive down the street. I thought maybe a backhoe, we all know the backhoe stories. We all have had experience with that. But there was no backhoe story. There was a cable that came out of the ground through a porthole, went up a telephone pole, this is the US, crossed the street, went down on the other side of the street, down another telephone pole and back into the underground system there. And on the telephone pole, the cable was severed, and it was severed because somebody had fired a rifle, maybe hunting or something, missed whatever they were aiming for and hit my cable instead. How do you prepare for that? You just can't. So you have to build in resilience automatically and upfront. So as I was saying, the hard part here is the cultural piece, right? So Amazon is very deliberate about how they create their culture. They have core principles around customer obsession, and I'll talk about all of these in great detail, about having the right people in the organization. Everyone's a builder in our organization. So there is no, software engineers are not the only builders. In fact, the CFO could be a builder, or someone in the security team could be a builder. Everyone's a builder. And then focus on the long term. I will dig into the culture piece in just a second, but I just want to again reiterate, this is the hardest part and the thing that we have to deliberately do every day. And so it starts with having a strong and very, very clear vision. And so the vision and mission of Amazon is to be Earth's most customer-centric company. That is a huge and very ambitious and bold goal, and we encourage everyone to have bold goals. But what it does is it actually gives us a North Star, something to aim for, which is being customer-centric in everything we do. But it also gives us the breadth to be able to innovate in all kinds of different directions, depending on what our customers ask of us. So with that, we try to identify what is the thing that will delight the customer the most. What is the problem or the pain point or the opportunity for a customer? Always looking at this from a customer's perspective and then working backwards to a solution. And we know as a business, we have to earn the trust, frankly, of our customers every day. We also know that customers constantly, they get used to the new cool thing, and today's cool thing is tomorrow's old thing. So we have to go back every day and say, okay, how do we find an even better, newer, better thing for that customer today? Yesterday's solution is great, but let's work on tomorrow's solution. And again, this is about this I like this quote, because customers are in fact always beautifully dissatisfied. Why? Because they, in addition to having the experience that we give them, they have the experience that all of you give them. And we're all collectively raising the bar on that experience. We're all collectively creating amazing experiences, whether it's an application, on the phone or a website, or even a consumer experience, on a check-in line or something. All of those things are getting better and better and better. And so we should leverage this excitement that our customers have, and not, a lot of, in the past, I would see it as maybe a problem. And I had people tell me I had a help desk team they would complain and say, oh, these customers, they're always complaining about something. Well, yeah, but that's awesome, because that means that's an opportunity for us to do better, right? So we have to listen to those complaints, and we have to look, what do people really want? And, you know, we've done that. We've done this for a long time. So obviously Amazon started as a bookstore and then very quickly moved into music. And then in 2007, I think this is amazing, invented a whole new way of selling books with the Kindle, which frankly was there was a debate whether they should even do that, because it would cannibalize the existing bookstore business. And Jeff Bezos said to the leader of the Kindle store, the Kindle organization, he said, I want you to destroy the other business. Didn't happen. What did happen is both businesses have flourished, right? And then over time, every time a customer opportunity arises and we hear from customers, you know, oh, if we could only order groceries, or we would like to speak to our devices. And we've been talking about this forever, right? So we seize the moment, we listen to the customer, and then we provide that solution. And I don't know if any of you have had the chance to go to a Go store, but it's strangely like theft. You walk into the store, you take what you want off the shelf, you put it in your bag, and you walk out. That's the experience. Now, you're not stealing because there's an app, and the app keeps track of the things that are coming off the shelf into your shopping basket. They don't know it's your shopping basket, it's a random ID. So it doesn't tie it to you as a person, but it ties it to you as an identifier. And with that experience, you know, we asked ourselves, how could we reinvent shopping? And what's the most painful thing in shopping? And the most painful thing in shopping, and I think you'll all agree with me, is standing in line in the checkout, waiting, you know, find 6 or 7 other people, counting out little coins, or maybe a kid crying, or, you know, whatever. It's not a great experience. So we wanted to take the friction out of it. It's all about removing friction, making the experience amazing for your customers.
Thomas, if I may,
yeah.
You remember that this is a British audience, right? We love queuing.
Sorry. That's funny. No, I think your days of queuing are coming to an end. Sorry. Might as well get used to it. So when we organize for innovation, there are 4 pillars, right? There's the cultural dimension. And culture, of course, is sort of the software of an organization, if you will. It's all the experiences, the history, all the things that make us us, unwritten rules, written rules. But we want to be very deliberate about our culture. And we have mechanisms. Mechanisms are processes that we can optimize and improve to solve common problems. Architecture, of course, right? We're a tech company, so architecture is super important in this regard. And then the architecture of the organization. How are we organized? How do we work together? So let me dive into the culture piece first. So when I say we're deliberate, it's extraordinarily deliberate we are. It's, I think of it as cultivating culture, right? A lot of us have come from organizations where we have a nice poster on the wall with slogans, and the slogans are great. We talk about them once a year in a company meeting or something, and we're all very proud. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is having these leadership principles and living them every day. So we have 14 of these. They start with customer obsession. That's the first one. And the last one is deliver results. And the other 12 in between are how we do it. And if you think about it, each one of these leadership principles is a shorthand for solving a particular kind of situation and dealing with a particular situation. And it comes with a body of knowledge and a cultural norm that we've all agreed to and we all learn constantly. And so when I tell a colleague, hey, are you really being customer obsessed right now? I don't have to explain it because there's all this context really there that we all understand. So it's almost like a compression algorithm for culture. It's awesome. We have things like ownership. Ownership is I like to give this simple example. If you're walking down the hallway and there's a piece of paper laying on the floor in your hallway, we pick it up, right? Well, some people don't pick it up because they say, well, that's not my job. That should be the janitor's job. I used to be in the Army, and if somebody told me that's not my job, that would be a really bad day for that soldier because we all share the space. We all share the ownership of the endeavor we're in, whether it's a company or a nonprofit or whatever it is. We have to have pride of ownership. And with that pride of ownership comes responsibility. I'll give more examples of some of these. These are online. You can look them up. They're explained in great detail. I find them amazing, and we use them every day. You can ask anyone on Amazon, and anyone on AWS, and we can all explain what each one of these means. Here's another one, invent and simplify, right? And invent and simplify, we're all called, everyone, every Amazonian is called to invent and simplify. We all, and you all know, what are the things that need to be fixed in your organization? What are the processes that are broken? What are the bureaucracies that drive you nuts that probably could be done better? There's so many opportunities, right? And so all of us are called to invent and simplify. And from an Amazon perspective, we also accept that it could take a long time and that people will not understand what it is we're trying to do. For instance, back to the Kindle. If you look at this Kindle on the left, that's the first ebook that Amazon created, right? And the idea behind the ebook obviously was brilliant. It wasn't our idea, but it was a brilliant idea to say, how can we carry as many books as possible, my whole library in my pocket? And how can I get access to new books really quickly wherever I am at? So this first device is a bit clunky, as you can see. You know, why does a book have to have a keyboard? I'm not sure, but that's what we thought at the time. But we tried it. We wanted to get out there and get a product out to market. And the thing that you don't see on this device, that's really the secret sauce here, is we put a 3G phone in there, and we actually paid for the connectivity, and we used that phone to allow you to download books, even though it was really expensive. We weren't actually making money on the thing, because we wanted that experience to be amazing, and we knew we would get better and find ways to save money later on and make it more cost effective. The goal was 60 seconds to download a book anywhere in the world. That was the goal. We accomplished it. And now over time, many iterations later, and we listened to the customer, we've made it a beautiful device. I love my Kindle. I couldn't really exist without a Kindle any longer because I carry around all my books. I used to carry around 5 or 6 books at a time. And frankly, I'm getting too old for that. So I'm really happy to have my Kindle. The other thing that people didn't understand is when Amazon announced that we're going to create Amazon Web Services in 2006, everyone said, what are you doing? You're a bookstore. That's a crazy idea. How can that possibly make sense and how can that possibly work? Well, this is older, the slide, by the way, fiscal year 18, so it's much bigger now. But the idea is, you know, our bet paid off, and it's because it was a calculated bet. We put a lot of thought into it, and we just went for it. And even if people just, you know, saying it's the wrong idea, and the investors said, hey, how are we going to make money with this? We went forged ahead and said, it's going to take what it's going to take, but we're going to deliver this thing. Along with that comes bias for action, another of our leadership principles. So as I said earlier, now the name of the game today is speed, right? It's being fast in business, being able to pivot quickly, being able to react to the market and not taking forever. At Experian, you know, in the early days, it took us, you know, eight months or 6 months or a year or 18 months to deliver a new product or a new feature into the market. That's too slow. We have to deliver things, frankly, ideally every day, but every 2 weeks will do. Every month is good, right? We just have to go faster. And so the trick here is making decisions quickly. A lot of times we spend time thinking about decisions in the wrong way. So we think about this as the one-way door versus a two-way door. A one-way door are the decisions that are really, really gnarly and hard, and you can't back out of them once you execute, right? So for instance, for us, that would be building a new data center somewhere. We really have to, that's a big decision. We really have to think it through and say, we're going to go for this. But a two-way door are decisions that you can back out of. You know, think of it as, a blue-green deployment in software. You can always undo that mistake. And I used to tell my teams, and I gave them autonomy to make decisions. I said, look, you can make any decision you like, technical, to move forward, to accelerate, as long as you can undo it in 1 sprint or 2 sprints. You know, if you can fix whatever, if it turns out to be wrong and you can undo it and take us in a different direction, you know, in 4 weeks, awesome, go for it. Don't ask me. If it takes longer than that, I want to know and I'll be part of the decision. But this two-way door concept allows us to go fast, even if we don't have all the information. It allows us to take calculated risks and to just forge ahead. This is about, you know, going as fast as we possibly can. Which brings me to mechanisms. So what are mechanisms? Well, mechanisms is our response to this little phrase, good intentions don't work. We encountered, and I'm sure we've all encountered, you as well, many, many times situations where something didn't work out, you know, software didn't work or an idea didn't pan out. And so we would ask ourselves, why didn't it work? And we would all agree, well, we just have to work harder. We have to be smarter. We have to study more, whatever the thing is. Those good intentions are great, but they don't actually work because it's hard to follow up. And we all know this in our personal lives. I have tons of good intentions, as my partner reminds me of daily. But we have to actually have a way to measure things and to make progress. So we have this concept of mechanisms, which are basically processes that have inputs and outputs with a defined metric, a KPI as an output, and an input, so we have input KPIs as well. And then as we're measuring the impact of this process to make something better and better and better. And as we're learning, we're feeding back, we're modifying, we're tweaking the process to make it more efficient. And one great example of that is how we innovate, which is the working backwards process. So I mentioned earlier, customer obsession. We want to work backwards from the customer. And so this starts with this process where we put ourselves in the shoes of our customer. We imagine what the thing is that we're going to build that will delight them, maybe in a year or 2 years, or even, maybe in 6 months. And then we write a press release as if it had been done. And the press release defines very, very succinctly what the problem was that we were trying to solve, how we solved it, why it was an amazing and delightful experience for that customer. We put in a customer quote, a fictitious customer quote. What will they say? A bit more detail. And then we add a quote from an executive of why it's important to our business and why we think this is an amazing solution. And that's it, right? And that's one page. And we want to write this briefly and crisply in one page to make sure that we can articulate something simply. If we can't articulate it in one page in a press release format, it's too complicated. And then we have other pieces here, but let me get back first to the customer. We have to be specific about that particular customer in that particular context. I've met, 500 enterprise executives in the last couple of years, more than that. And commonly I'll hear things like, well, I want to solve the customer experience for all my customers. Well, okay, that's great. We all want to do that. But which customer and in what context? What are you talking about, right? Specifically, it's really important to understand what particular pain point we're trying to fix and improve. So we use these five questions. And by the way, I think this deck will be made available afterwards. Is that right? Yep. So we use these 5 questions. Who's the customer? What's the problem? Is the benefit clear? Importantly, number 4, how do we actually know that we understand what the customer needs or wants? Very important. And we spend a lot of time on these. And what does the customer experience look like? We spend a lot of time on these. You could do this really quickly in 5 minutes and you wouldn't get the right answer. This is an area to invest time in. Then we also create a frequently asked questions document, which I'll talk about in just a second, and a visual experience, just to kind of put some color to it, right? Just say, what does that look like when it's done? What does the experience look like? By the way, this could be code. This could be a process. It doesn't have to be a visual experience, right? It's just something to clarify in pictures what we're trying to accomplish. But let me get into language first. As I mentioned earlier, we want to write this in a very crisp and succinct way and clear way. So, Yannis, could I have you read this thing for me?
You can, absolutely. We will optimize the customer experience to enable enhanced accuracy in buy box pricing to facilitate increased rapidity and elevated confidence in purchase decisioning by cross-border retail customers.
Yannis, do you know what that means?
I haven't got a clue.
This is what happens when we use the Dilbert generator to write our content. What we actually mean is this one. It's very simple, right? It's about total landed costs. It's about pricing, right? It's a very simple statement. I'm not going to read it, but the language is much, much, much clearer. Now I understand what it is we're trying to say here. And we do these kinds of atrocities sometimes. I also managed a marketing technology team a while ago, and I would see this kind of stuff coming across my desk, and it's just, I'm like, well, what are we saying? So let's be clear about what we're saying and keep it simple. And in our frequently asked questions, we have an internally facing and an externally facing FAQ. So we imagine, remember, this is the future. We haven't built anything, we haven't coded anything, we haven't designed anything, we're still just writing at this point. We imagine what the questions will be that our customer will ask us. How much is it going to cost? Who do I call if it breaks? How does it work? Why is it awesome? And then we face internally and we ask ourselves our own questions. How does it work? Who's responsible? What are the dependencies? How much is it going to cost? How are we going to price it? Those kinds of things. And then This is a living document. This is, you know, we don't do a specification or a requirements doc. This is the document we use to build things. And it's the frequently asked questions where we get to the heart of the things that we're trying to solve, so that people can actually, an engineer can look at this document and say, ah, I get it, what we're trying to do. I read the FAQ, I read the press release. Now I'm reading through the FAQs, I get it. Or they may have new questions, we'll add them, and we'll answer them. Sometimes we don't have an answer just yet, but we'll write down the question and we'll answer it later. And this is widely shared, by the way. This goes to all the various stakeholders and teams and everybody who's involved, because we want to get a really, really wide input. And then we have the visual piece. And again, keep it simple, right? This could be a picture off of a whiteboard. That's perfectly fine. It's not about being artistic or anything. It's about having an idea, a quick idea of what we're trying to do. One more word on writing. We are a writing culture. So this is actually how we communicate and make decisions. So we go into meetings and everyone in the meeting will read a narrative. If I have an idea or one of my team members has an idea, they have to write it down. And again, they have to write it down in less than 6 pages, and it has to be absolutely crystal clear. And then we sit down in the meeting, we read the thing together for 30 minutes, and then we have a very rigorous debate. And why do we do this? A couple of reasons. One, we want to make sure that everyone that comes to a meeting actually has read the document. I've been, and I'm sure you have been, to many meetings where people weren't prepared and they still have an opinion and they still argue about things. It's not a very successful meeting. We want to make sure that everyone in the room has the same basis from which to argue and have a good conversation and ask questions. The second reason is we want to make sure that we hear all the input, right? So a lot of times when you're in a meeting, the person with the greatest charisma or the boss could be standing up front. Everyone's just nodding their head and saying, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And we don't actually hear the dissenting view, or we don't hear input or questions from people who may not, you know, be extroverted. They might be introverts, they might be shy. We want to hear all the input and then have a rigorous debate about it. So conclude this section, you know, I think this is absolutely true. You know, people write the thing or build the thing and then give it to the marketing team and say, hey, go sell this, make this appealing. We do it the other way around, because we actually think if we articulate the success, the delight that our customers will experience, and then we build it, then we're on to a successful solution. If we just build something, build it and they will come, yeah, maybe they will, maybe they won't. So that brings me to architecture. How do we build these things, right? So this hairball is actually a representation of Amazon.com in 2008. And so each one of these points is an API, an application programming interface. And these APIs are written in such a way that they're a contract, right? Once we define the API, we do not change that contract. The contract stipulates, I ask the service a question, and I get a particular kind of response back. What happens behind the scenes, totally opaque, doesn't matter, nobody cares. All I care about is that when I ask the question, I get the answer back. And so what Amazon.com did is they completely deconstructed the monolithic application that was Amazon.com, which was, you know, it was so large, it was called Obidos. It was so large that it took a day to compile. And if there was a problem, it took another day to fix, right? And then you have to compile it again. It was very slow. It was also very hard to replicate in other places. So if we wanted to, you know, open up a new store somewhere, we had to build the whole infrastructure and then make sure that we didn't have drift between the systems and the code and make sure it was all the same. So instead we said, no, let's break it into the simplest, smallest functions we can, microservices, and now functions, to make it as simple as possible. And we can then iterate on each one of these functions independently in parallel, instead of having to wait for someone in the database team or in the security team or wherever while they're fixing some dependency somewhere. So it gives us control over the piece that we're working on as a team. It also enables everyone in the organization to have a self-service mindset, right? So if there is something you want to build or do, you can use these APIs. And this is why Amazon Web Services is really amazing, I think, as a former customer and now an employee, because it allows self-service and encourages self-service. And we can build amazing things with these very small, very, very powerful building blocks. And we don't have to, again, wait for other teams to assemble something that takes months or even years. Yeah, and so we have lots of these. This is also older, this representation. There's 185 plus new services out there across all the various functions that you could possibly want, you know, whether it's security or blockchain or storage or, you know, whatever. And if we don't have it, ask us. And if there's enough demand for it, we'll probably build it. And that's actually what happens. 90% of the things that we build in AWS come from customer requests. When you combine all of this, and there's also the DevOps piece, right? The continuous delivery piece. When you combine all of these things, microservices, the continuous delivery, the various environments, how we structure ourselves, how we architect ourselves. By the way, this is also an older slide. I apologize. I meant to update this and I didn't. Anyway, it equates to about 11 releases, 11 deployments per second on Amazon.com now. It's extraordinary. So, if you all went to Amazon.com now, you would all have a slightly different experience because we're A/B testing constantly. And it's completely transparent because remember, these are small changes with small services. So it won't be readily apparent, but there could be many little functions that we're improving and tweaking and making better for the customer. And then finally, how do we then organize ourselves, right? This is actually also really critical. And the reason it's really critical, let me go back to this for a second. There was a research done in 1967 by a gentleman named Conway. He wanted to know what's the relationship between system architectures and organizational structure. And what he found in 1967, we're all very slow in the IT department, is that when we build architecture, when we build systems, we actually replicate the communication structures of the organization that we're in. So we have many hierarchies. We will have many ways of having a hierarchy inside the solution. If we have siloed departments, we're actually going to recreate something akin to siloed functions that communicate the way we do in the real life. The inverse is also true. If we structure our organization so that we have a much flatter organization and a much freer organization where information can flow freely, we can actually build those kinds of systems more easily. Adrian Colcroft calls this the inverse Conway maneuver. And what we need for this, and what we need for all of this, frankly, is having, again, builders, people who are willing to experiment, to try, have a builder mindset, people who might, on their weekend, might play around with a Raspberry Pi with their kid on their own time, or they want to, improve a process, or they want to simplify bureaucracy, like I said earlier. So, but for us, everyone's a builder, and we want to give you the tools to build and build as fast as possible. And we actually take a lot of time in this hiring process, and I'll just touch on it lightly. When we hire people, we want to make sure that they're also a cultural fit. So we have turned away brilliant, amazing people, and they're really, really amazing and wonderful people. But we've turned them away because they didn't really fit into how we think in terms of leadership principles. And we'd rather not bring in a superstar who doesn't fit into the culture. We would rather say, you will do amazing things somewhere else, and we'll find someone who actually fits into our cultural construct that we're trying to maintain. We're, again, very deliberate about. We have this concept of 2 pizza teams. I'm sure many of you have heard this before. 2 pizza team, basically the size of a team that you can feed with 2 pizzas. Let me be clear, these are American pizzas. If I tried to do this in Germany, I would have a team of 1 person. So these are 6 to 8 people. That's kind of the sweet spot. If you go up to 12, you can do that. After that, it's too big. And when I actually went through this process, I have built my first team in Experian. Eventually, I added 1 person every sprint from the organization because I wanted them to have the experience one at a time instead of just putting everyone into a new way of doing things. And then when the team grew to 14 is when I split it, right? That was my mechanism to scale. And then you have a geometric progression. You can add more and more people every sprint and so on. What I love about this is that these teams are fairly autonomous, and they're supposed to be autonomous. We don't want to wait. Again, this is about removing the wait time. We don't want to wait for some executive or some team or some committee to come back with a recommendation or a suggestion or an approval for something. We want the team to execute. We want them to build whatever they need to build and get it done fast. It also means they're responsible for what they build. So, and I made this change in the US, and I said, look, you are all on call now. And they all said, what? We're software developers. The operations team is on call. I said, no. You're on call, because if it breaks at 3 in the morning, and for some reason it's always 3 in the morning, you're the one who's going to take the call, and you're going to fix the problem, because you're actually the only one who can fix it really fast. Versus an operations team that has to go find the SOP. We all have an SOP, right? Rhetorical question. Or you want to find that person who knows how to fix it, right? So having autonomy, but also having ownership and responsibility is what this allows you to do. And the other thing that is amazing about this, you can have a small, 2-pizza team in front of a whiteboard, 8 people, 10 people, and you can have a rigorous debate about something and just get to the solution, versus having a team with 50 people, you have committees, and it all takes time again. You can't stand in front of a whiteboard, which I think is a problem. We also, again, this is about speed and innovation and encouraging people to try things, right? So we want to experiment frequently. Now, the problem with experimentation is this, and I'm guilty of this. When I was, again, leading the Navy and I had a data center there, I told my team, I want you to try new things, I want you to build new things. And then when it failed and my systems crashed, I had to rein them back, and I looked for the guilty party, the person that broke it. They never tried something ever again, right? So I want to encourage people to experiment, learn from the mistakes, learn the lesson that's there, and move on. And we celebrate this. So Jeff Bezos has the letter to the shareholder, comes out every year. Great reading, by the way. I recommend you look at these if you're interested, because they're really full of the little pearls of wisdom of how we do things. For instance, how many of you have a Fire phone? I'm going to guess nobody. I've asked this question, I don't know, 15,000 people so far, or maybe 20,000. I've found 2 who had one. This was a total colossal flop. $170 million in write-down of inventory, really an expensive mistake, right? Now, I have met some of the people that were on that team, and none of them were fired. None of them were chastised. None of them were punished in any way. In fact, they've all grown and continued to have a great career inside of Amazon. They've built new teams. The things that that team learned about building a device such as a Fire phone has informed, from supply chain or management, or how do you think about devices, those learnings have informed other product lines, like the Echo. So for us, while a huge failure, it was also a great opportunity to learn and to pivot and to drive other products. And we're happy with, if we have 20 or 100 or 1,000, for us it's probably in the thousands, things that we're working on, experiments that we're trying, hypotheses that we're testing in the market, many of them will fail, and we're okay with that. In fact, we expected, and we want to have a couple that win, and the couple that win will more than pay for the cost of the failures, right? So that's how we do that. And obviously every organization has to figure out what that right level is, how high can they go with their failures, but don't avoid the failures. The failures are where you learn things. You have to get out of the comfort zone and move into the area where you're outside of the comfort zone, because that's where innovation happens. Let me go one more thing here. Jeff Bezos also tells us, look, if you're not failing big, you're not thinking big, right? If we don't experiment with bold ideas every couple of years, we're not trying hard enough. We really, really, really want to push the envelope and think as big as possible. A colleague of mine had an idea that he took to Andy Jassy 4 years ago, and it was a really good idea, and it was worth a lot of money. And Andy looked at it and said, this is an amazing idea, but you're thinking too small. Figure out how you can add a 0 to this. And he sent them packing. And my friend went and worked on it some more, came back to Andy, got the approval with the extra 0, because it was big enough. We want to think big, and we're all always encouraged to think big and to go bold. Go bold or go home, basically. And I think that's it. And then we can actually have some questions if there's questions. I went really fast. I had too much coffee this morning, maybe. But the idea is, organizations have to remove the barriers. They have to remove the things that get in the way. And there are lots of things that get in the way. And as leaders, and I think, again, we're all leaders, we can work on removing those barriers, whatever they are. We want to enable everyone in the company, want to democratize access to ideas and access to tools. You have so many ideas in the organization, you know your customers, you understand what customers need. So let's allow that to happen. Let's allow those ideas to come to fruition, to flourish, and to build amazing and delightful experiences for your customers. And with that, I think that is the end of my talk, except I have, you can't see it, I'll send it to you. My reading list, it's a small reading list. I have many more, but this is sort of the core of how we think about, we some of my colleagues, we think about how to think about transformation, how to achieve transformation, how to make things happen. I especially want to encourage you to read Mark Schwartz, Art of Business Value, War and Peace in IT, and his newest one on bureaucracy, which just came out or is coming out next week. Amazing stuff. Please reach out to us if you have questions. You can find us on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to respond if you have questions about the presentation afterwards, time permitting, of course. Thank you.
Wonderful. I mean, if this was, an in-person conference, I'm sure you'd get an amazing round of applause there. So yeah, from me, that was incredible. Yeah, first question I'm going to kind of kick off with actually. Yeah. So Amazon have got an incredible culture. It's something every organization around the world aspires to do, to really articulate it in a way that you do, but also see it kind of live and breathe through the entire organization. What I'm intrigued about is, how have you managed to maintain that culture during COVID?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, let me answer that question in general, right? Because COVID or no COVID, maintaining culture is actually, it's not a simple thing. And that, again, this is why I talk about cultivating culture. That's why I talk about being deliberate about culture. So it starts with the hiring process. When we interview candidates, right, obviously we want to make sure that they have the technical fit or whatever the job is, or the fit for the job, for the role, and that's done. But then we really want to make sure that they actually will be successful in this culture. And the way we do that is we ask questions about our leadership principles. And, all of us have principles that we live by. And a lot of times they already align with what we're talking about. You don't have to have a perfect match. We just want to see that, you're being thoughtful about what you're doing, and you're working in a similar vein as we would do anyway, right? So that's number one. Number two is we iterate and teach this every day. When you first come in, there's an onboarding process. In the onboarding process, we over-index on the cultural piece. Of course, you have to do technical training, a lot of it. But we were definitely super keen to make sure that everyone shares this culture. And, people come from many organizations. They bring in their own other cultures that they have, right, from the other organizations they've been in. And sometimes that's a bit of a challenge, but it doesn't take long, because once you're embedded in a team, or you're with other people who already live this way every day, it kind of happens by osmosis, right? This is why I actually had this idea before at Experian of bringing in developers into my software development teams one at a time, because I didn't want to coach and teach them. I wanted the team to demonstrate what success looks like, and they could learn from the team, and they could learn from each other, which is way better. Learning from each other is much better than having some talking head up front explaining things. And then we have endless amounts of self-service, again, training available, where we encourage people to look at, we look at videos, we want to hear things, we talk to each other, we do sessions. I do enablement sessions for many teams where I talk about this kind of content and other things. So again, over-index on maintaining and creating this culture, COVID or no. This is something we have to all do every day.
I completely agree. Yeah, it is constantly, it constantly evolves, and you've got to kind of keep reiterating it, right? Yeah, great insight there, Thomas. One question here from Alan Blunt. He wants to know how small startups can engage with AWS.
Well, first of all is, hopefully you have an account. And I think there's still a free tier for new startups that are starting for the first year, if I remember correctly. So you make use of that. Come to our conferences, come to our events. We have a annual mass event called reInvent, which until this year, used to be in Las Vegas every year. Last year we had, I think we had 53,000 people descend on Las Vegas. It was an amazing event. And in that, we do teaching, we have courses, but it's not us, it's our customers teaching each other, right? Which is really what we value. Customers come to the stage, they present how they solved a particular problem, or how they think, or how they architect, how they organize, how they design, and it's all shared across the board. Well, this year we're going to do it online. So there's actually going to be a massive online event around reInvent that's accessible. So that would be another way to engage. Find meetups. There are meetups probably in your region, and connect with others who are already working in AWS. And if there isn't a meetup, create one. Again, self-service. And then we have a Twitch channel, which is really cool, where you can watch some of our evangelists build things in real time. I don't have it handy, but you know, you could Google it and find it. There's lots and lots and lots of ways to engage with us.
Fantastic. A question from Chris Blackwell here. Are there aspects of the culture which have become less relevant over time?
Let me rephrase that question a bit. It's an insightful question. It's about evolving your culture and recognizing that things change. And yes, in fact, it has, right? So the very first set of leadership principles came about in 2002, and there were 10 of them, not 14. And basically, Jeff Bezos and his direct reports, a small group of people, got together and they said, you know, we have so many new people coming in, they don't really understand how we function. We have to codify this. And so they created the leadership principles in that room based on their own shared knowledge and experience. And over the years, it has evolved, right? So we added some, we dropped some, we consolidated some. And I think on the slide, there's a little box that says, unless you know better ones or other ones. That's an encouragement for all of us to question whether those leadership principles are still the best ones today, and as an invitation and an expectation, frankly, to challenge our own leaders to say, well, actually, you know, now we have to think about how we do this a little bit differently. And I have a colleague who sent an email to Andy Jassy and said, hey, I have an idea. And, you know, this is Andy Jassy, right? Andy Jassy answered and said, well, let's hear it. And they had a conversation about this idea. So there's a great willingness from the leaders. And maybe this is another message that I want to share with all of you. The leadership matters, the vision of the leaders and the willingness to hear from everyone and to learn from everyone is really, really important. And again, this is part of the culture that we live every day.
Indeed. And then Bulat asks, should innovation be related to the core Amazon products or services, or could it be something different from it?
Absolutely. So another great question, right? So when you start with the customer, right, and the customer comes at you with something you have never thought of before, which happens, it may not relate to what you already have. It may be completely orthogonal to something you have, maybe a completely new idea. We're going to try to solve that regardless, right? It's not that we have a portfolio and a giant roadmap of all the things that we want to build. It doesn't work that way. We want to hear, again, from customers and say, okay, what's the most important thing, the most pressing need for a group of customers somewhere in the world? How can we solve that? And we solve that. And it doesn't matter if even if it's competing with other products, we'll still do it because we want to make sure that we meet that need as much as possible.
Similar to the Kindle story, right? You kind of well, the aim was to cannibalize the bookstore, but it actually kind of created two very, very successful products as a result. Okay. Yeah, a kind of message question from Yoma here. Thank you very much for the presentation, first of all. Lots of love, by the way, on the chat for the presentation, Thomas.
Thank you.
What was your key takeaways or lessons from the pandemic? Has this changed some of the way Amazon works or changed the hiring tactics for the future?
Mm-hmm. Very good question. Yeah, so again, I want to make it broader. Again, think big, right? So we have a pandemic at the moment. It's very current, and we all know this. But I actually think, you know, and I'm thinking about the next crisis. What's the next thing that's going to happen? And the key to that is, again, resilience and being able to pivot and being able to evolve to solve whatever the situation is. So specifically to COVID, right? We have been working remotely for a long time, but we also have lots of offices, and most of my colleagues work in offices, and now they don't. You know, now everyone works from home, like probably all of you do as well. So we had to learn. You know, I have my team does workshops. These workshops are really, really powerful when they're done in person. We do them over 2 days, but now we can't, right? So we didn't want to stop doing that. So we had to figure out how can we do this remotely? And we figured out a way to break it into smaller chunks so we can do, you know, 90 minutes or 2 hours over multiple days using multiple channels. So yeah, it definitely has changed how we do work. I fully expect that it's going to change how we do work in the future. I think once COVID comes to conclusion, which it will, you know, we're not all going to go back to the way it used to be. I think this has changed us forever. And in some regards, it's good. In other regards, it's not great. But we have to be always willing and embrace these changes when they come. And from an architecture or from a business perspective, because that's really what I focus on, is can we build systems that are resilient and can pivot into a new direction? We have lots and lots of customers who had to deal with, you know, there's questions. I'll give you an example. Melia Hotels. Melia Hotels, you know, it's one of the largest hotels in the world, hotel chains or groups, was struggling with, well, how do we deal with check-in of guests during a pandemic? And so they came to my team and we helped them imagine through the working backwards process what a solution would look like. It's their process, right? We just facilitated the workshops. I don't want to say that we can't have the idea, it's their idea. We just helped them think through it. But they came up with a contactless check-in process where you can, you know, now apparently just go, or they're building it now. You can walk into the hotel, walk into your room with an app, and you don't have to talk to anybody if you don't want to. Or there's a kiosk and you can do it at the kiosk. Or if you want the human touch, you go to the registration desk and you still do it the old way. So while painful, while difficult, there's always a hidden opportunity. Let's find those opportunities and solve those problems. And that's really what this is all about.
Absolutely. Mike Folkard asks, could Amazon start selling real estate? And Mike's from GBS LEP, so I don't know if GBS LEP have an agenda there. But yeah, intriguing question.
Theoretically, I suppose it's possible. I don't know that that's something we would do. I haven't heard anyone say that. Yeah, theoretically, of course. But you know, we want to look at, can we actually contribute something meaningful to the customer experience? And if so, what can we contribute, right? So I don't know that we would want to get into the business of selling real estate. We might get into helping real estate companies with their solutions to have a better experience. You know, for instance, spatial computing. Can I walk around virtually today in the building that I want to buy? Well, it's hard, right? You have pictures and you look at the pictures, but what if you could actually model the building and walk around inside of it? And by the way, I have no idea if anyone's done this. I'm just thinking out loud. That would be awesome.
There's actually a company based in Birmingham.
Oh, really?
I was on an accelerator with this particular chap called Mark, and he's built a virtual tour of a kind of property for landlords. And
very cool.
That is, and I'm not even making this up. He built that on AWS. So there you go.
There you go. Sweet.
Cool. So I have a couple of more questions available. So yeah, I guess kind of this question, I'm going to kind of slightly reword it, but Amazon have obviously kind of benefited. You know, they've been one of the winners through the pandemic. You know, interestingly, we're running this off Zoom. Zoom have done very well. Amazon have done well as well. What are kind of Amazon doing to kind of support kind of small businesses, customers, and kind of everyone else in between, you know, through this period as well? Of course, we've got the Amazon Small Business Accelerator being launched in the West Midlands today. But yeah, just interested in what else Amazon do, because I know they do a hell of a lot.
Well, without getting into the specifics, we do help customers where we can, because we recognize these are tough times, right? But there are lots and lots of areas where we're trying to forge ahead to help find solutions to the really gnarly problems in the world. For instance, gnarly, sorry, West Coast, guilty as charged. The Amazon Climate Pledge, right, comes to mind, where, and I know this is not COVID, but again, I'm thinking about the next thing. You know, we all collectively have an opportunity to make this a much better planet than it is, you know, through all the efforts around sustainability, through reducing our carbon footprint, through reducing our water consumptions, and there's many things we need to do. And so Amazon made the pledge. I don't know if you heard about this, but as a company, we've pledged to be carbon neutral by 2040, so 10 years before Paris. We have an ambition to be 100% renewables for our data centers by 2025. Take a look at the pledge page if you're interested in sustainability. And you know, we're looking for ways and opportunities to help our customers. And again, it's about our customers. It's not really about us, to reach their sustainability goals and their goals in general. And when those goals intersect with human good, that's really awesome. And you know, of course, we want to support them as much as we can.
Absolutely, yeah. I love some of the stuff Amazon are doing around that. I think it's such an important kind of aspect for all of us. You know, we can kind of help make the world a better place. You know, that's for me, that's a responsibility of every organisation across the world. especially those with power. So great to see that. And then final question, a personal one, I guess for you, Thomas. How was your? This is from Veronica, by the way. How did your career in the Navy help you forge a career in tech?
Veronica, that's a really insightful question. It's interesting. When I was in the Army, actually, I was active duty Army, and then I wound up working for the Navy. You know, I got lots of ribbing for it, of course, as one does. So I spent, 15 years in active duty in the reserves, and probably another 10 years in Department of Defense service, whether Navy or otherwise. And throughout, it's actually how I got into IT, which is kind of funny. I was a enlisted soldier and got plopped on a desk, and here's your computer. And I opened it up, and I expected a normal experience, and it was Linux. Like, what is this? So I had to learn Linux on the job, right? Because, okay, that was very cool. And ever since, I've been doing IT. But the thing, I think the one point that is actually the most salient one is that in the military, there is this notion that, yes, there's command and control and hierarchy, and people are very, very order driven, but there's also a notion of getting the mission accomplished, getting things done, right? And in the Army and in the Marine Corps in the US, there are very, very specific trainings that we do around small unit tactics, right? So small units, these are, again, strangely enough, up to 12 people, typically, and that's kind of the size, that's the sweet spot. And they're given the commander's intent. The commander says, accomplish this mission. Here's the parameters of the mission. Here's what I need to have happen. Make it happen. And then the team does it. And the team has the autonomy within the rules of law, right, to accomplish whatever that thing is. And that's actually very analogous to the two-pizza team idea and to creating autonomy in teams with mastery, right, and purpose, which is Daniel Pink, I think, talked about that. That's really the thing where there's a great intersection from coming out as a veteran, and we hire a lot of veterans, by the way, for this reason, and because we want to have a place where veterans can land. But there's this mindset already, and you can just equip that veteran with tech and access and some training, off they go.
All about those transferable skills, hey?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for that. As I say, there's been so much love for this presentation, and kind of, you delivered it so eloquently. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you all for being there. Thank you so much. Take care.